computer. And hi, Judith. I'm Hayden.
Hi,
Nice to
nice to
meet
meet you,
you.
Hayden.
Yeah. So basically, what we were hoping today would be um, for you guys to share some details, like maybe between the two of you, some things that really stood out from your time at St. Mary's. And just, yeah, we were hoping it'd be kind of like a natural conversation, maybe even like podcast style, where you guys could feel free to share like what you felt like could be added on to past interviews, stuff like that. And then we have some questions that we could also use to guide from the third interview as well.
Um, so one thing I'll say is like me and Judith to this day continue to be really good friends. And I feel like we knew each other at St. Mary's. We, of course, St. Mary's is so small. The Latino community at St. Mary's is even smaller, right? We knew each other. We were good friends, but I think being part of our struggle and really um, being in community with one another during that time, I think is what really kind of like truly united us, that to this day that we were able to continue that. I don't think if our struggle would have happened, we might have like, stayed Facebook friends or social media friends, but maybe not in-person friends or like, we have celebrated all the changes our lives have gone through in these past 20 years almost. And so I think a lot of that is due to the involvement that we had in organizing through our struggle. And like I spoke with my team before, I think the relationships that bloomed out of that change that evolved, I think was a core part of student organizing. Is like, what does that look like? Because it's not just being involved in a movement or trying to get something, but in that process, we're growing as human beings. And who we're growing with, I think, has a huge effect on us personally, and then the relationships that we continue to build after.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It's really cool to hear how you guys have maintained this like friendship and like how those formative experiences at St. Mary's help make it what it is today.
Yeah.
Judith, is there anything you would like to add on to that or just echo back?
No, yeah, really close friendship. And yeah, I think also because I think the reason why we stayed so close and why our bond, I guess, sealed within time is also because we both really believed in what we were doing. We both really believed that organizing on campus, what we had to say was very important. And I think to this day, we believe that it was important. And I don't think it would have been true had we not really believed in it because there are students that organize, during their college years and just consider it a phase. But for us, it was something that was truly true to who we are.
Yeah, I think part of what Judith is saying, like me and Judith came from very different like who we were involved with or how we were involved prior to this. Like something that I shared with my group, like I came into St. Mary's being deeply Catholic and involved with anything that has to do with ministry to towards the end, like not completely like I don't know what the word is in English, but like letting go of that. And I think what was really powerful in the different folks that organize is that we were kind of all at different places. Judith was very involved in other parts on campus that I was not at all involved with. I didn't hold relationships with, and likewise, vice versa. I think for many of us, and it's not true for all of us, what connected many of us was actually the work through SILSA
Yeah,
or
I'm glad you're mentioning that.
yeah, or that type of work. Like I don't know, I think of us as like as a web, and for many of us, SILSA was, even if folks didn't work at SILSA, like the people hung out at SILSA, people's friends were in SILSA. And so SILSA really did, I think for me, supported me personally in my growth at what it means to be a service to my community. But also folks came from, I mean, there was a lot of folks I didn't interact with prior to our struggle that I built close relationships with because we had that value in common, whether the past 3 years, we were doing that in different parts on campus.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's really cool, like how you guys had that like web, like the fact that you weren't like connected at first, but managed to come through together, and then being able to bring those shared experiences from different parts of campus together. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And I don't know, and Judith, you could add to this. I think I talked with my group, like some of the basketball players at some point were really anti us, and like threw water balloons, sorry, at our tents and things like that. And again, because of that web that we had, folks that were involved or adjacently involved with us that had those deep relationships with some of those basketball players could go out there, and speak to them and kind of address them, not as like someone foreign, a random student coming to them, but someone that they've already built relationships with. And I think that's one of the positives of us organizing like broadly in that way, is that everyone was kind of knowing someone, and could address certain concerns that different groups were having, right? Yeah, go ahead, Judith.
I would say the one concern, because of the week that we had picked out, there was, I think, communions, sorry, first communions were happening during that week. And we didn't, there was the thought like, oh, they should have considered like, there's going to be people coming onto campus, visiting on campus. And that was the conversation that I had because of my connection with ministry to like kind of soften the blow. Like, this is something that we felt needed to happen. And we didn't look into that, but it wasn't anything like purposeful. There wasn't any, we had our own reason for picking that week, or, whatever the reason was. I can't remember now.
Yeah, I can't. Well, see, and that thing that you brought about the community, I was like, I don't even remember. I didn't even remember
Yeah,
that.
I had that conversation.
Right.
And
Again,
I
because
wasn't
that
involved
wasn't
with
part of
the
my,
basketball team balloons. I think
Right.
we heard about it, but I wasn't involved in like that conversation. But it's exactly what you're saying. It's like
Right.
it's also the fact that it's a small school, that probably is why those connections are closer. It's not like a friend of a friend went to go
Right.
have that conversation with the basketball team, or it wasn't a friend of a friend having the conversation with campus ministry. It was
Right.
like very direct.
It was us. Yeah. Yeah, that is true. Yeah. Do y'all have questions? I don't know. I feel like once you have questions, well, maybe me.
Yeah, questions are
but
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
help us thinking, because I was like, I already said everything I thought I had wanted to
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
We didn't have many set questions. Eric, do you maybe, I know you said you wanted to mention some of the ones from the third interview. You want to?
Yeah. So this is just to kind of create more of like a dialogue between what we had spoken with Judith last time, and kind of bringing more details today. Like, how did your time at St. Mary's College shape your future trajectory, not just in your professional life, but also in like your advocacy and personal life?
Yeah. Was that question for me or with Judith?
For both, I think.
For both of you
Oh.
guys, like kind of like if there were shared parts there.
So I will say my personal life, definitely. I ended up marrying someone that was involved in our struggle as well. And although we're no longer together, the reason that we did end up getting married is for the reason that we thought our values were aligned within this organizing. I think similar to the way, Judith and I are still friends because of this organizing, it really did bring up folks' values, whether folks ended up, I think what Judith was talking about earlier, whether folks after college ended up living those values looks different from everyone. There's folks in our struggle that are still completely involved in like social justice advocacy or living their lives in a very specific path, versus other folks are what Judith said. These is, some folks' paths that then after college they're like, oh, actually, I'm not really. That's not the path I choose to go down. For whatever reason. And so for me personally, I would say at St. Mary's, and then also through our struggle, I knew that this was my passion, that I wouldn't be happy doing anything else. That I'm, for me, my values are like the most important thing in my life. If I'm not living my values every day or trying to live my values every day, or if I go back in my values, like for me, I feel a lot of like internal distress. And that's just the person that I am, right? Everyone is their own folks. And so I knew, like, if I'm not doing this, if I'm not staying true to who I am, and this is true to who I am, then I'll be a very unhappy human being. I know that about myself. And so I was talking to my group, because this was one of our questions too, was I chose then was like, what am I going to do? And a thing that I felt that St. Mary's deeply missed, although my sociology classes were amazing, my anthro classes were amazing, my history of Latin American classes were amazing. I always felt like this question of ethnic studies, which is something that we pushed through our struggle, was a piece that I was missing. And so I decided to go to graduate school for Chicano studies. At the time it was called Mexican American studies. And so that's what I chose to do. The jobs I've had since have always been aligned with specifically looking at higher ed as a site of potential liberation, or higher ed as a site of potential oppression, and my role within supporting students through those institutions. So I would say 100% St. Mary's for me. Whether St. Mary's intentionally or unintentionally did that, whether it was my own choosing and who I surrounded myself with, and the organizing that we choose to do, and the professors that I chose to take, and the explicit professors and majors I chose not to, deeply had an impact in now the work that I do 16 years later.
Yeah, that's so cool. I do remember answering this question, and as she's answering, I'm remembering maybe some of the spots where I like didn't remember specifically because I wasn't part. It's mostly because I wasn't part of the conversation, and it's like on the earlier organizing that happened because I joined pretty close to when we camped on campus. So I wasn't part because there were a few questions about like whether there was pushback from, admin. You and I remembered that, well, you remembered, but as we were talking, that there was actually the student council was someone that was not supportive of what we were doing. But then I do know that some of the like main organizing members did have conversations with admin. So I don't know if you could maybe tell Eric a little bit about that because that part I completely missed.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember 100% like how it all lined up, so I had to go back and read stuff, but admin 100% pushed back. Admin said you're not going through the correct avenues, just like the student council. There's correct avenues to do things. Also, a lot of the admin were so deeply disconnected from the student experience that they believed the stereotypical student narrative that like we're all wealthy, we all come from middle class families, and we're all having a very specific experience that looked like, oh, whatever they were trying to sell, like the propaganda that they were pushing, they were believing themselves of what a St. Mary's student looked like and what a St. Mary's student's experience looked like, right? And all of us that did not have that experience where we were struggling to pay, struggling to eat, people were like getting in trouble for like stealing food essentially, because students were hungry. All of these things that were adding up. And then on top of that, like the folks that we organized that were queer or LGBTQ, their experiences were vastly different. Black students' experiences were vastly different to this propaganda that St. Mary's tried to push about the narrative and like to encourage more students to come. And so when we kind of disrupted that, when we made visible what was invisible about these are the things that are happening on campus, this is the way that we're experiencing it, these are the way that women are being assaulted and disregarded on campus, I think the district completely, or not the district, sorry, I work at a district, so I said district. The campus leadership were completely, I feel like naive, if I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, or chose not to think about us and our needs as a different population on campus. And so when we first were meeting with folks, people were saying we do things the wrong way. I found a video that Tim, one of our struggle members, he documented things a lot, luckily, and he shared a lot of those things with us a year or two back ago. And there was a video And I didn't remember there's a video of us walking into the soda center, and I think it was like a donors day. I don't know what it was. You can't really hear, but you could hear there's like presentation, there's a table set up, people are eating, and we walked in that day that we had like put tape over our mouths and we were all wearing red. It was like a silent protest. We walked in with our signs, and people held their signs for a few seconds and then walked out. And people got really mad about us doing that type of thing. They were saying like, oh, that we're disrupting, that we're being rude and disrespectful to the folks that are trying to have a different experience than we're trying to have. So it really was it really was like, what should we do next? And the camping didn't just come out like, oh, let's do a camp because we chose it.
Camp. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's gonna be fun and we're gonna enjoy it. It was really, what do we do next? They're not listening to us. They're not taking us seriously. They kept on telling us like every bullet point we had, they would try to find loopholes to how the bullet point demands we had weren't realistic, or it was technically already happening. And it just really felt like, again, they weren't taking us seriously. And I was like, we're students. We don't know the back, like, I don't know what I don't know. And if you're saying that something is happening, then we're saying you're not letting us know something is happening. Those processes are already in place. All we know is that women are getting assaulted in numbers and they're not getting the support. And they were like, yeah, we have a hotline. How come y'all didn't know? That's on y'all as students. Why don't you reach out to us? Oh, this is the process. And so they kind of really try to manipulate our demands in a way that if you see like the second iteration of the demands or the last final iteration, like we were like, we know this and this is in place, but what we're asking for is this and this and this. And so there was a lot of the leadership just completely thinking like, we're going to tell them they got the demands wrong, or we're going to tell them we're not allowed to fire someone. So no, you can't have that as a demand, and the students are going to move on. And I think that's where we chose like, what is the next step was to camp. And we still were, while we were camping, like, well, what if it doesn't go through? What is the next step? So we weren't like, we're going to camp and we're going to think that everything's going to be figured out and they're going to accept everything we say because we decided to camp. We knew that it was we were going to build steps until we get to whatever step we need to get to in order for change to happen on campus.
Thank you for that, Malena.
I wanted to ask too, if you could maybe expand a little bit on how Associated students responded, and how, like, I mean, what did you have conversations with them? Like, what were those conversations like? I mean, I know you mentioned like they were like go through the process, but like, what were they? You know, what was their response?
Yeah, I don't remember 100%. So I'm just gonna remember when they heard us trying to organize, some of their advisors came to us and was like, this is not how you're supposed to do it. And then when they realized like we weren't listening, they went to our advisor for Hermandad, who was then Mirna, which I think still, Kevin, remind me if I'm wrong, I think it's still Mirna, Dr. Mirna Santiago. Yeah. And was like, you need to put these kids in check, essentially, like, you know, you have to tell them to do the things the right way. And I was telling Judith this the other day, like Mirna clearly, and like this is a phrase I will remember for the rest of my life. Mirna was like, I am not their mother and they are not children. If you have an issue with them, like go with them. Do not come to me. And for me, that felt really like empowering because I'm like, yeah, at this point, we're like 20, 21-year-olds. And also Myrna's there as our advisor to be like, I'm here to support y'all with what y'all need. And if you're trying to do X, Y, and Z, like do it and figure it out. And I'm here to do that. But for the district to, or for the leadership to think that coming to Myrna, she was gonna be like in cahoots with them and like whatever the word is, us down, I think they didn't expect. And so there became Silsa was, and I don't know if it still is, was right next door to the student government place, and we shared a door. And then there just became like hostility between us to one point that they were like, we needed to get our poster stamped for certain things. And we were like, fine, then we'll get one of our posters stamped. And then that stamp went missing. And then they said, oh, it was these three men of color, two Latino, one Black man that were in the center at this time that stole it. And it became this whole thing, like we're going to involve the police, like this huge thing because the stamp to approve flyers went missing. And so I think that hostility kept on growing. And for folks to be like, why would you assume, or who would you assume? And the fact that like this stamp that you could purchase at, I don't know, Office Depot for $15 went missing, and you're going to call the police on these men of color for that reason, like added to the hostility. And so I don't remember how we ended up having a conversation, but at one point they were like, you need to show up to the council whenever the student council meets. Um, and essentially the council thought that was going to be the place where they would like chastise us for the way that we decided to do things, because if like students were discontent on campus, the correct process was to go to the student council and then they would address it. And we realized, like, if you look at the student council, they very much look like and have the experiences of the typical student that the JC, again, like I'm at the JC, so here I am. That St. Mary's does, and so even them were completely disconnected to the experiences of the students that we were advocating as or on the behalf. So I just remember showing up to one of the meetings and there being like tensions and back and forth conversations. And we left and we're like, okay, we already did what we said we were going to do. We brought up the issues that we were facing, and we know that nothing's going to come out of that. So then we're going to still keep on organizing the way that we had planned on doing it. And I remember after the fact, like at least the advisors were trying to come around and apologize and be like, how could we support? But because of all the hostility that had happened beforehand, I feel like there was deep division that never got repaired.
And I would just add, or not add, but I do remember, wasn't the provost one of the people that donated things? Like towards the end, once we actually camped out, was it the provost?
Yeah. Yeah, so Beth Dawkin was the provost at the time. And I think she had just gotten hired on, if I remember correctly. And I could be completely wrong, but I remember the narrative was like the leadership didn't know what to do with us, so they pushed us like the new person. And I remember our advisors were like, "Hey, y'all, give her a chance. Y'all seeing her like SMC evil person representing the college." But they were like, actually, like I guess her background was a lot around like equity work, diversity work. But at that point, we're like, you're just representing right now, like you, like St. Mary's sent you as a representative of them. You for us are St. Mary's, right? Like now later, I'm like, oh yeah, like maybe right cool. As a 16 years in the future, I'm like, oh, so but I think she really was in a really difficult place because she was at the end of the day, her responsibility was to represent and protect the interests of St. Mary's, even though maybe her heart was kind of like along with us. So you could see that heart piece when she would donate with us, when she would like try to meet with us, she'd be like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to try to like meet with the leadership. But I think now looking back, the fact that they sent her in very intentional on behalf of St. Mary's, and the fact that we weren't meeting with the president of St. Mary's, I think spoke volumes. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
My question is like, what are the best way, like you guys dealing with passive equity? What are the like best way to promote like actual like real equity on campuses?
Yeah, I would say like calling it out, right? I think many times the type of equity that is pushed at conferences or that is highlighted in different ways and that is boasted about is that passive equity that you're discussing. And if no one is pointing to it, like at my college, and this is true at almost, excuse me, every college, this like performative equity piece allows the college to feel good about themselves without actually doing any real transformative work to support students. And if no one is showing them how, like, just because you say you're doing this or just because you use this type of language doesn't mean that you're actually serving the students in a certain way. It really is the students and the students that are having the unequitable experiences for them to highlight that. Because again, like the college, if we wouldn't have said these are the issues that queer students are facing, that Black students are facing, that Latino students are facing, that women on campus are facing, the college would have been okay and happy, never having to like look at these uncomfortable truths.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you are paying for the experience, whether you're getting grants or scholarships. At the end of the day, you're paying a bill, and
Right.
I think that should also empower the students to. I love also going back to Mirna's comment, like she was treating us as an adult, and maybe the admin didn't see us as adults. They saw us as kids, like acting out.
Right.
But like with her support, it was pointing out like, no, these are adults and they're making an adult decision to do something about what they feel isn't right. Um, so that was just something that came to mind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, hi, I'm Kevin. Um, I'm a junior at St. Mary's. And then I'm part of La Hermandad. And like I do a few other things on campus.
Cool. Something I actually met, I don't know if you remember Sandra. She was a year younger than us. I actually met up with her yesterday.
Um,
And I was telling her about these interviews that we're having, and we were kind of trying to like think back of what it was like to be a student at St. Mary's. And also, she wasn't part of our struggle. So I was also trying to get like, also kind of remember what the feeling was like if you were outside of our struggle, like what was it like? Because one of the questions my group asked was, did I fear being judged for what I was doing? Something like that. Or the conversation was ended up there. And something that I said as I responded was that I think because both you and I think we care about our values and we live by them, that we didn't really have that fear. Like we didn't really care about what other people would think of us. And I'm not sure if that's just because of our personality or our upbringing or why that is. But also, I think the time when we were students at St. Mary's, we kind of had that because I think now, and I'm not going to assume like I know what it's like to be a student at St. Mary's now. I think we had a conversation where Malena brought that up, and I'm like, yeah, we don't know what it's like, but I do feel that because I feel like people do have a fear of what other people think. Everyone has had that, but I feel like even more so, we are very subconscious of, and if you just step out of line just a little bit, it like sticks out, and everyone kind of like gangs up against you. If you're not fully like woke, you're like if you have an opinion outside of it, or even if you're on the other side, there really isn't that middle ground to have that discussion, like to have a discussion.
yeah.
Sorry, I kind of went all over the place, but
No. Well, and I think you make an important point. I feel like, yeah, I'm like, this is what I know is right, and this is what I'm gonna do. And I do know the people that didn't get involved, including like I had housemates that
yeah,
like did
same.
not at all, like not even showed up to be like, I'm gonna bring you some snacks, right? Like completely acted like they didn't know me. During this time, I feel there always is this like policing of like what's the right way to do things.
Hmm.
And when and I would claim that like for a lot of people is never the right time, right? Um, again, like, oh well, not this week, like we're like not this week because communions are happening that week, not this week because we're having donors happen that week, not this week, right? And so then at the end of the day, the point of the camp is to be disruptive. We are trying to disrupt business as usual because business as usual is oppressive and harmful and it's hurting so many students at St. Mary's or at whatever institution folks are at. So I do think that it was interesting to see, and I mentioned this in my group, like some of the it was some of us started since the beginning, and then other folks found out what we were doing, like Judith, and was like, oh, that aligns with my values, I'm going to join it. And towards the end I was looking at pictures and I was like, I don't remember all these folks being there at the beginning, and this is not to like, for whatever reason folks joined way later, is a positive thing, because I always had the feeling like we were so enclosed, we were so closed up that we didn't actually do a I shared this in my group. I don't feel like we did a great job of like really reaching out to the people that had different than opinions than me. But when I'm looking back at these pictures, I'm like, in these pictures where we're celebrating that the St. Mary's agreed to meet our demands and everyone's signing, and it was like everyone that's been involved in St. Mary with our struggle go up and take pictures. And I didn't share these with y'all because again we didn't get consent, so I think some of them I like try to blur out as much as possible. um and there was so many people there, and so for me I was like, maybe I'm misremembering, maybe I was really hard on myself, that I thought like because we didn't have 100% of the Latino, Black, queer woman population, that therefore we didn't do a lot of transformative work with our peers. But in looking at those pictures, I think I'm like, maybe I'm misremembering that piece because again, I wanted it to look a certain way. But then on the other side, there were folks that at the beginning were completely in disagreement with us when we held that one town hall. And I don't know, Judith, were you already part of the group when we held that town hall?
I don't think so.
No. And people were asking questions, and like two of the people I remember clearly, men of color, were like pushing back, like, no, this is not how you do things. Like that the experience that y'all are saying that y'all had is not mine, and don't try to say that all students of color are having that experience because that wasn't my experience, right? They were constantly like the loudest voices. They ended up camping out with us, and I remember being like, when did that shift happen? I have no idea. But they ended up like in all the pictures that we took and all the organizing that we did in the camping, like they brought out the biggest camp, the biggest tent.
Oh.
And so again, like I don't know how that happened. I remember thinking when they showed up, like, weren't these the people that were like against us? So I don't like, those are the people that I think would be interesting to know about, of like, or to hear from on what shifted for them, what changed for them, who did they talk to? Because that's super good insight, I think, for folks like you, Kevin, that you're trying to like gather more people to be involved, would be learning from those folks that at first were like, they didn't want to have anything to do with us, and at the end they were like some of the main organizers with us. So I think that is a voice that I would be interested in getting archived as well.
Right, which goes back to the point that you made about calling it out. Like, if you don't call it out, like that's kind of what starts the conversation that ends up with, someone arguing against your point or whatever,
Right.
and then ends up being like on your side. If you don't point it out, another person also isn't gonna be able to, hey, I relate to that experience.
Right.
I remember there was the new leadership conference that we were at, Malena, and there was a student there that asked a question to the panel because she was a disabled student and she felt like there wasn't space for her on campus, or there wasn't anywhere for her to go where she felt like welcomed. And I didn't answer this to her, but I really do feel that the answer would have been, or the answer I would give to anybody is, at the end of 4 years, I realized that I had to make that space for myself. And it shouldn't be that way, right? Because for other students, it's like, we're going to give you this whole experience.
It's in the
for
fabric,
you
yeah.
to enjoy. Yeah. But if you ever feel like, hey, I can't find a space, yes, you can start by demanding, but also you make it. And this is how we decided to make a space for ourselves and for other students, not just ourselves.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I would say to that, like, we didn't do it by itself as students. Like, if we wouldn't have had the support of some staff member on campus, like, I don't think, right? Like, if we wouldn't have found an advisor, like, good luck trying to do anything on campus. So folks like Myrna, folks like Brother Camillus was like, whatever y'all need, whenever y'all need. Like, he was out there every night with us. Also, I was looking at pictures and we had like full on bonfire. I'm like, is that even allowed?
Yeah, I was remembering that too. I'm like, we smelled like smoke the next day.
Yes, we were always smelling like smoke because it was like raining most of the days. So we were out there in the cold, and I was like, I don't know, like now insurance is like, no, open flames. Because that's what I deal with at where I work. But there were folks that were, again, I mentioned with my group, like Jennifer Hung, was her name Cynthia Gano, Dr.
Yeah.
Cynthia Gano, right? There were all these professors that somehow aligned themselves with us or supported us. Like I mentioned, my supervisor was like, yeah, you're living the work. And so as much as like they allowed us to kind of guide and lead the way, there were always staff members in the background giving us food, being just moral support for us when we had disagreements between one another. Like I'm sure they heard my side, and then like 20 minutes later they heard the other person's side, and they help us kind of like, well, think about it this way. I'm just going to give you questions. I'm going to give you things to think about. And I felt like that allowed us to feel like we weren't 100% by ourselves. Because again, we wouldn't have been able to do anything 100% by ourselves.
That's so true. And that was something she brought up because she worked when she was a student. I'm talking about Sandra. She worked in the admissions office, and so
Mm,
she was like listing like this person and this person was there, like people of color. So she was able to list, and it's like our experiences, like you're saying, because we had someone there supporting us. I think mattered what our experience was going to be, and it wasn't just like finding an advisor. I feel like St. Mary's at that time, like if you just like froze time and you were able to see like who was like for her side admissions, right? That's what she was looking
right,
at. I would look at maybe campus ministry and SILSA, like
right,
who was the leadership there, and like and then the faculty, the professors, like who were the professors there. I think we would be able to see if we compared the times like that things have changed, and I think we felt even more empowered, I think, because we knew we would have the support.
mm-hmm,
And you're naming some people that weren't people of color, but had the ability to see our side, I guess.
right, right. Yeah, have any other questions?
Oh, oop, sorry. I don't. Do you have any, Eric?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask like a follow-up to that our struggle. How did you guys rally people together when it came to organizing our struggle? Did it happen kind of naturally through friends, or was there like a campaign process? Apologies if you guys have already gone over this.
No
No.
worries. Um, so I think I mentioned it a lot of times, like the relationships we had built. So most all of us, if I remember correctly, with like the exception of one or two of the core like beginning organizer folks, of course that grew. We're all like seniors or in their fourth year on campus. And so we had built those relationships through like partying together, through being in classes together, through being the few folks of color on campus, right? Like those relationships had already been built all those years. And then also, most of the folks like were involved. Like if you were actively involved as a Black student, you were probably involved in BSU. If you were actively involved as a queer LGBTQ student, you were probably involved in GSA, right? And so what we realized is, and it was large part by one of the men of color that was like, we need to organize all together, because we realized when that flyer was slurs was were written on those flyers, and when things started happening on campus, that we realized like in this instant, this community is being attacked, but then in this other instant, this other community is being attacked or is being harmed. And it really was like we realized we were all tied together, right? And so the way that we did it was like what used to be Hermanos Unidos, that at that semester I think changed into La Hermandad. Started organizing with like, okay, we're going to reach out to the Black Student Union specifically. We're going to reach out to Feminists United. We're going to reach out to Gay Straight Alliance. And I think that's it. And as because we were part of Hermandad. And so then we chose like, hey, we want to meet with the presidents or VPs of or core leadership of those clubs and come together. And then that's how we started organizing what our struggle is tied with yours. Some of us ended up going to a conference in Berkeley, um, like early in spring semester. And in one of those like keynotes, someone said something to the extent of like, "Our struggle is tied with yours," and I was like, "That's the name. We're gonna take it back." And that's the
Yeah.
name that we decided to move forward with. And then for short, we just called it Our Struggle. But really, it was that like solidarity work that realized like as individual Latinos, we could fight and advocate for ourselves, but like nothing would change if all these other communities are still being harmed, and we're all essentially dealing with the same oppressor, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that was a really beautiful way that again, I don't think I had seen had happened in the 4 years that I was there, of like all these different clubs coming together and doing really, really amazing work, I would say. But of course, I'm biased.
Um, and the only thing I would add, from what I remember, kind of the things that led up to it too. So thank you for reminding me. There was that Berkeley. I didn't attend that Berkeley conference, but I heard about it. Um, then there was also on campus, though, there was an open mic event. And I'm not sure if that was part of, maybe that's where some people heard it. I might have heard it through that open mic of what you all were doing. But then there was an incident on campus. I couldn't remember. Could you, because I don't think Eric knows about the racial slur on the posters.
Yeah, so the racial slur, there was posters, and I don't remember the exact poster, and I found a picture of it, and so I'm trying to zoom in to see. So it was that someone, it was like a poster about there was going to be maybe a talk on like race and ethnicity and queerness or something like that, and someone tagged those posters and like put the N word where it said like race, and just totally like
Definitely.
desecrated, or I don't know what the word is, the posters. And so because of that, then then BSU did organized like a day on the like chapel lawn where they talked about this incident, and people ended up sharing their own personal narratives, and of that came people sharing spoken word, and then BSU decided to organize the lounge.
Okay.
From
That's
that,
the
that was
open mic.
monthly, yeah, that was monthly evening in I think Haggerty Lounge, where people got to share. And the majority of like the spoken word that was shared was around oppression that folks were experiencing, either like lifetime, but also specifically to St. Mary's. And through that organizing, I think is when the organizing of our struggle started happening through that.
Cool. Thank you for piecing it
Yeah,
together.
I mean, I don't know if I mentioned this. I remember when I was a freshman, there was some incidents that happened on campus that I remember again at the chapel lawn. I think they were either juniors or seniors. An incident had happened about like the way, I don't know if St. Mary still has their magazine, but like a Chicana was asked to like share her story and her family story, essentially like what y'all are doing about like how'd you get to St. Mary's, and then they photographed her, like they went to her house and they photographed her family, and the way they wrote the story was so demeaning to her and her family and her community. And the pictures they chose to use, I remember clearly that, like, I guess she was like, people were like, "Oh, that's why you're a bitch because your parents look like they're bitches too," or something to that place. And so I remember people were like, "Oh, this isn't a one-off. Like, this is what St. Mary's does. They exploit students of color's stories for like funders fund us, but then like, how are they harming students in the way, and how are like students of color that are being exploited?" Then not like being able to survive on campus because they don't get any of that funding money. All right. So there was like all these issues around that specific story. So I remember just going out there to the chapel lawn and like this happening. But then I don't remember, and go again, I wasn't the folks that organized then. I don't remember anything happening after that. And so there were instances of like students wanting to say like, hey, we're having a really hard time at St. Mary's. And it wasn't like St. Mary's had, obviously the archive project shows like it's not like St. Mary's was completely unaware that these things were happening. They just chose not to look at it because constantly every year something was coming up, something was brought up that St. Mary's didn't address and was just left in the dark. And so by the time we were organizing our struggle, I think we were like, no, we're not going to be okay with just doing a one time, like, we're going to do this one piece if nothing changes. Because again, like, as they're like, okay, you did something one day, cool, and we move on. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted, and we hoped that actual change was going to come about.
Mhm.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I feel like it's kind of like the way we clickbait today. Like we like don't treat people like human beings. We turn it into a story just for like attention and not realizing that it's actual people we're talking
Right.
about. You know, it's like our family stories too, like
Yeah.
where we come from, our roots, and just being able to honor like the sacrifices those before us have made. So I really appreciate you guys sharing this.
Yeah. Of course.
And
Yeah.
just to point something out, I think because I guess that would be the difference is like then we weren't posting it and we weren't like letting like the world give an opinion about it. We were experiencing it and there was enough time to like process it and then decide like are we gonna do like what are we gonna do about it. And they were like Malena saying we had been there for 4 years, so by our senior years like we had plenty of these um experiences
Right.
to um, to then feel like we needed to do something and speak up and point them out.
Yeah. Which I shared with my team and Hayden the response, like the official St. Mary's response of them, like that night that we met um with Provost Beth Dopkin of like this is the 5 that we're gonna meet in the moment and we're gonna change, and then these are the 5 that are gonna have we're gonna be working on long term. And I've spoken to other students like that have been at St. Mary's after I left, and it really seems like it might have been just like to appease us, and nothing much has changed. So I'd be interested in going back and looking at our 10 demands and seeing if St. Mary's did keep their word, and met all the 10 in the way they said that they were going to meet all 10.
Yeah.
I think unless anyone else has any questions, I think it's pretty much all we have. I know you have a meeting at 11 or 12 minute, but Eric, do you have any more questions, Kevin?
No, I just want to thank you both very much for your time. I feel like we got a lot of great details, like learning more about your story together. I think it was really cool. And yeah, if you guys have any other photos you could please share with us, or
I
I
still
know
need to
it's
get
tricky
photos.
with blowing out faces and stuff, but
I know they look like just like white dots, and I don't want to be disrespectful because the reality is I'm not in contact with a lot of the
Yeah,
people
yeah,
of our struggle. I'm just in contact with a certain
yeah,
folks, and I don't want it to be disrespectful. Like, if there's any way y'all could like make a like disclaimer,
yeah.
because I could see myself like looking at something and being
Mhm.
like, why you blur out my face? Like, are you like erasing
Right. Yeah,
as being
yeah.
part of that history, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, we'll
So it could be both
definitely.
ways. So maybe saying like
That's a good
people's
point. Yeah,
faces that were blurred out did not give explicit consent, and so we're
yeah.
trying to
Okay.
respect privacy. And maybe like if you don't want your face blurred out and like you recognize yourself, I don't know, talking with your professor to see what
Yeah.
obviously
Okay.
y'all wouldn't because y'all would be done with the project, but how could this be alive so that if folks do want to be like, I want my face on there, later down the road that we haven't had a chance to connect with those folks, because again, I don't want it to come off like I'm like, oh, only me and Judith are important, or like the 5 of us that we got consent from, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to talk to our professor about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's not going to be really public. It's just going to be through the archives at some
Well,
Same
point.
with the website, no?
it's going to be yeah, it's going to be archived, but there's also going to be a website. So the website, I don't exactly. I mean,
He
so
said
yeah,
it's gonna be
technically
linked
it's
on
public, but I
the
don't think
website.
that it's not like we're like sending it to the news or anything.
Right.
Um,
But
but
I could see it like I'd be like, oh, this is a cool thing. I'll post it on my social
exactly,
media, and then someone
exactly,
else
and
could
then
be
someone
like, oh,
else,
that's cool.
and then it
Yeah.
spreads. Yeah, for
But
sure.
it's a website. So technically,
Anyone can get it if they have
essentially
a link.
the 67 million people in the world or 7 billion people in the
Yes.
world that are could technically see
Yeah.
these, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank y'all
Thank
so
you very
much. Good
much.
luck. I know y'all in the last stretch of y'all semester. So good luck.
You
Thank
got
you.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
All right. Take
Um,
care. Bye.